All right, so we are now moving on to our next unit, and this will be our first assignment. So we got used to the class. You can always revisit these. We got familiar with finding other people's pixels online in high quality and compositing with them. For exercise 1, we just played with vector shape tools. For exercise 2, to make custom emojis. Now we're going to look at that first digital art discipline more hands-on with a few assignments. And that discipline is compositing. It's like digital collaging. Using other people's pixels or outside pixels, because you are allowed to take your own photographs and use that for this project as well, to make something that is wholly your own, something that is transformed into an original piece. And one career for digital artists that remains very popular and very needed, especially with all these streaming services, all these sci-fi shows, all of these fantasy adventure shows, all of these video game concepts, is something called concept art. And concept art is my favorite way of working with studios, whether it's animation, whether it's video game, whether it's live action. It's where you just get to put creative images out there that might get a project greenlit and budgeted. So if you're going to do a live action Flintstones remake movie, they would call on concept artists to see what would that prehistoric background look like, right? A new Star Wars series, what would this planet that's all made of bamboo look like? You know, that kind of thing. Because in Star Wars, of course, every planet can only be one thing. That's what Star Wars does. So, we are going to do setting design for our first kind of concept compositing project. So you're going to create a fantasy landscape. And there are pretty strong rules for concept artists when you do setting design. You do not do anything that's living and moving. That's not true. Things can be living. You don't do what's called figurative content. So figurative content are people walking around. You don't put any people in your landscape because that makes it obvious that it's not a landscape, it's just a picture, right? So you want to think of this as a stage set, something that's going to go behind the actors or behind the creatures. And then later we can put those figurative elements in. So that could be animals, that can be human beings, but it can also be things like working vehicles, right? It can be things like water features that we expect to be moving. So like fountains or waterfalls. Doesn't mean you can't have water, but you don't want to have very obvious moving water because it's not going to be moving. And so it wouldn't work well as a stage backdrop. We'll have the opportunity later to animate things like that and to put things in. But for this project, we are doing concept art as what's called a clean background plate. In order to do this, we're going to sketch out a vision of what we want, and then we're going to find image references at high enough pixel resolution for print quality to fill that in and to kind of use as puzzle pieces to make our original sketches come to life. And there are two things in this unit. We spend a little bit longer in it. You can see it on the course outline. This will be due, I believe, in 2 class periods.
The sketch or the finished product?
The finished product with the sketch, because it all gets turned in together, on September 16th is when it's due. So a week from today. So we'll have all next class to work on it, and we're going to need it, right? What I want you to come to class with is your sketch. And we'll try to post that next class just so everyone has something posted. The other thing in this unit is our first question of the day, which just asks you to think about digital art as an entity versus analog art or traditional art forms like painting, drawing, sculpture. And the analog or traditional art equivalent of compositing is collage, right? So what are the differences between digital collage and traditional collage? So this is question of the day 1. You want to read through that, and you want to put your thoughts down by 11:59 tonight. It's a way of getting you to look at this unit, really engage with it, not put it off until next class, because we need to be working on it and have sketches for next class. These are some past examples. So kind of like exercise 2, where you turned in not only your vector shapes, but also the little screen grab that you did that started it all. You have to post at least 2 things to meet the requirements for this. You have to post your sketch, your ideas that started it all, and they can be multiple sketches or just one, and then you have to post your finished composite. Sometimes I'll post on multi-day projects, I'll post my progress for each day, but that doesn't mean that that's required. It's just to help remind you of where we got by the end of class. And then I always have the videos in our YouTube. So this student posted a vertical example and a horizontal example of the kind of sketch they wanted, and they even posted a little inspiration. I really like looking at animation backgrounds because some of my favorite setting designers work in animation, especially like Looney Tunes, Nickelodeon, somewhat Disney, depends. But they do the backdrops that then character animators put all of their cell shading on top of, right? And that's still the way it's done, whether it's digital or whether it's traditional. It's just how, if you paint it digitally or if you paint it with gouache on board. So this student did a similar thing, a horizontal sketch, a vertical sketch, but they knew they wanted to use glaciers and icy things and the northern lights. And then this was how their finished composite came together. This is how the high desert composite came together. Now, both of those are fairly believable, but they are fantasy landscapes because they don't really exist. Right?
More like elevated and standard.
Yeah. You get to put your own ideas, like maybe extreme scale, right? Or just weird shaped rocks and extreme lighting effects. But fantasy can also mean something totally out there, right? So this is an example using all screen grabs from video games. And as long as they're over 1,000 pixels, you can use them, right? So you can sometimes find wallpapers, things like that. But the idea was to do a post-apocalyptic Seattle that's all bombed out. And a lot of it was from clean stuff that then got composited to be really dirty. But then some of the bombing damage was from video games that are also post-apocalyptic. Again, other people's pixels. You can take from whatever sources you want. You build it into your own idea. I'm going to give you the warning that man-made stuff is harder to composite with than organic stuff. And that's because man-made stuff it either matches the perspective of the viewer or it doesn't. Whereas organic stuff, you can never tell if it matches the perspective of the viewer. That's because of horizontals, verticals. But this student did a really good job matching it. You can see it printed up on the wall there. Because remember, we're going to be making these print quality. And we did a cool aluminum print effect for that one, which he really liked. This one, it's a good example because it's actually pretty simple in its elements. I'll make it a little bit bigger here, sorry. So you can see they just wanted kind of a desert landscape. They wanted the sun setting, this kind of puffy cloud sky. All of those will come from different sources. And then they wanted figurative content, but they're not allowed to do figurative content. So what can you do? Well, a la Lord of the Rings, when they're like going through rivers and you see huge sculptures. If you want to set kind of a human scale, think of doing human creations that aren't meant to be moving. So architecture, statues, broken down vehicles are great in that kind of post-apocalyptic setting. But you just don't want to have a vehicle that we expect to be moving just sitting there, right? It doesn't make for a great background. And then you can just do kind of wild things. You can do strange things in the sky. You can do strange geological phenomena. This is like a volcano with this huge rock stuck in it. And we're going to learn about tips how to make your landscape sketches better. And there's more examples in the student portfolios in Imgur. Please don't post anything to Imgur until the end of the class. But you can see what other students have done with their sketches. And what you'll notice is that they leave them free of things you expect to be moving. This one was kind of a cheat, but I thought it was kind of an interesting cheat. It has this time-lapse kind of blur effect of cars going by, but it's just constant. So it just becomes a lighting effect. And they can even be interior landscapes. They don't always have to have a skyline. They can be underwater. Some past instructor examples. You can make them long, you can make them tall. But one thing we're going to try to do is to have a clear foreground, middle ground, and background, what's called 3 layers of depth. We'll We'll talk about that a little bit more beginning of next class. All right. And then, of course, you can look at the YouTube videos. And this is assignment 1 back going several semesters back. So you can see me demonstrate this lots of different times, including what I'm doing right now. All right. First, we need an idea. Because your requirement, just like when we did exercise 1, is you need to use a minimum of 5 different high-quality references in your composite. More likely, you're going to use like 9 or 10. But you need 5 major components, right, from different sources. And just like your exercise 1, you don't want to over-rely on any one reference. So you want them to be like similarly impactful to the end design. So if I take this one image, which is actually public domain because it was taken by, or it's a digital art piece commissioned by NASA of one of these Goldilocks planets, and it's big enough, it's over 1,000 pixels in each dimension. But if I took that and then I just put like lots of different stars and moons and different rocks on it, I used it like a sticker sheet that then I put little things on, that's not me making up my own landscape, right? That's me adding stuff to someone else's landscape. But if I say, oh, okay, I really want to use this foreground, like swell of the earth, and then I'm going to add my own middle ground, which will be something else, my own background, which will be something else, my own sky, which will be something else, and then my own planets, then it's an original landscape. It's no longer derivative of this one source. It's transformative, just using this as a small component. And we'll be talking a lot more about copyright and why that distinction is important. So to be inspired, your final work needs to be at least 8 by 10 inches by 300. I'll usually do it bigger. I'll usually do it around 11 by 14 inches by 350 because we're going to be using Photoshop for this in this section. And that can handle bigger files faster than PhotoP can. But you can still work on them in PhotoP outside of class. You just always save as a PSD file. My inspiration, I mentioned, I love cartoon background design. It does such a good job with few features to showcase foreground, middle ground, and background. And then you can see the difference. So if you have foreground, middle ground, and background, like these rocks are foreground, that island is middle ground, the clouds are background. This is focused mostly on the foreground. Same thing. Foreground, middle ground, background. Foreground, middle ground, background. Why are these 3 layers important? Because when you put characters into this, it activates the space in a much more convincing way. If we just did background, if I just had sky and the ocean, then there's not a lot you can put on top of that that's interesting because there's no space to activate. So you want foreground, middle ground, and background. The best is middle ground focused landscapes, which means you have something forcing its way into the foreground, but then most of your focus is on the middle ground, and then the background, the far background is just behind this. So to show you this, and I'll usually do this in the video. Let's see if I have FaceTime here. I think I have it somewhere. What does it look like? There we go. I'm going to show you what we can do as an exercise. So do this with me, okay? Put your hand up in front of your face, pretty far from your face, right? Now focus on your fingers. And you'll see that your fingers are sharp and clear, but if you notice around your hand and your fingers, it's all a little blurry. Make sense? That's foreground and background. If you shift your focus, keep your hand in the same place, but shift your focus to the background is clear, but your hand is blurry. That's still foreground and background. That's what you call 2 layers of depth. Now I want you to take another hand and put it in between. Now focus, though it might make you a little cross-eyed, focus on the hand that's closest to you. And you'll see that it's still just foreground and background. Only the hand closest to you is sharp, and the hand that's further away is blurry like the rest of the background is blurry. But if you focus on the hand that's in the middle, you look through one blurry hand, focus on this hand, and what's behind this hand is also blurry. Blurry, focused, blurry. This is 3 layers of depth. So this is how you get 3 layers of depth in an image. It's not always about blurring it. It's sometimes about lighting. And you'll see it in storytelling a lot as well. So middle ground focused landscapes tend to be the most successful to have the most variety. And they work really well for concept artists.